Hey, friends, you're watching Behind the Scenes Divine Intimacy Radio. We have a return guest just because we liked him so much. He's back. Eric Sammons, editor of Crisis Magazine. Anyway, before we jump, we're going to talk about holiness for everyone. And I think that means you, whoever you are, unless you don't want to be holy. I don't know. If you don't want to be holy, you're not going to heaven. So I think you should listen to the show. What do you think?
Sure, I think that's a good idea.
Excellent. My wife agrees with me. It's kind of rare, but that's good. No, kidding. I'm kidding.
It's not nice.
It's not nice. It's not true. Before we go to the show, a couple of things we want to tell you. Oh, other opportunities beside the show to be holy is Ecce Homo, Prayer in the Paschal Mystery Lenten Retreat. Bishop Cousins, Dr. Anthony Lillis, Josh Johnson, Father Josh Johnson. Who else? All kinds of
amazing people. There's
amazing
over
humans.
50 speakers.
50 speakers. So
we even have breakout sessions for spiritual direction, which I think is really cool because I'm getting to host those.
Awesome.
So we have Father Boniface Hicks.
Yeah.
And who else is on there? Father Chris Clay.
Yeah.
There's another priest.
There's another priest.
Oh, Father Donald Haggerty.
Oh, very cool.
Beautiful priest that writes a lot on the contemplative life. Just amazing author.
Great book recently wrote on John of the Cross, Master of Contemplation.
So this is a really neat retreat. You can listen, you can get some direction.
And it's like $1,000 a seat, right?
At least. That's what, what is it? That's what it's worth.
Right. But it's free.
Yeah.
So we like giving stuff away because we like people to go to heaven. Lots of people.
Yeah.
Whether you can afford stuff or not, which is really cool. SpiritualDirection.com events. Look under there. You'll also see you'll see Divine Intimacy in Marriage, which is because our last event was over full. We're going to do another one in
November
of
first part of it's this year.
Yeah, at the Shrine of the Most Blessed Sacrament.
Amazing anointed ground
in Hansville.
Yeah. And
the great thing about that event is we allow men to be men. We don't ask them to like hug and cry and stuff like that.
It's an amazing retreat, and it's all come out of prayer and our own relationship, our own
Catholic
mystical tradition, all of that. We didn't base it on anybody else's retreats. Right. It's totally different. We've never even been to anybody else's marriage retreat. So
no kumbaya.
Right. None of that. So come be transformed, because we just watch marriage after marriage be transformed.
Yeah.
If I thought too much about it, I would just weep.
Yeah, we had two
because of all this beautiful fruit that's coming forth, and and the surveys came back, were just off the charts.
Glowing. Yeah. We had two folks, spouses this last one, privately come up to various members of the team and say, I was going to leave my spouse, and because of this retreat, I've decided not to. One decided to move out of the
bedroom,
off the guest bedroom back into the main bedroom, and another said they weren't leaving. And then both couples, I think, have come to our formation for after the retreat. Anyway,
it's amazing.
For those who have good marriages, want them to be better, or struggling, want them to,
Mm-hmm.
So Ecce Homo, Prayer in the Paschal Mystery, that other event, Divine Intimacy in Marriage, SpiritualDirection.com events page is where you find all that stuff.
Yeah, don't miss out.
All right, let's go ahead and jump into the show. On your mark, get set, go. This is Dan and Stephanie Burke. Welcome to Divine Intimacy Radio, your radio haven of rest,
your hermitage of the heart,
your monastery of the mind, where we lift our hearts and minds to heaven to draw upon the wisdom of the saints to help us navigate this tumultuous life. And boy, is it tumultuous.
Yeah.
This is a tough time for the faith. We need saints. We need to look to the saints, because many of them lived through way worse situations than we did.
Right.
I don't know. I think we're going to find out about a saint today. What do you think?
I think so. And we're all called to be saints. You too, Dan Burke, are called to be a saint.
That's not possible.
And if you are listening to this, you are called to be a saint. Raise your hand. Check your pulse.
Not
That's
possible.
you.
It's not
yes,
possible.
It is.
It is?
It is. With the Lord's grace, all things are possible.
You know what's great? I always love this idea. And who are the only people in heaven?
Saints.
Right. So either you get well, one, go to hell, which is bad, but let's just say you're not going to hell. The other options are purgatory. Like, who wants to do that? Right? Because no merit, suffering. Like, give it to me now.
No, you're right. Let burn it off of me now, so
right.
that I can go be home.
I just want to be with
the
Jesus
Father,
when
right?
I die.
Yeah.
So who's our guest?
Our guest today is Eric Sammons. He is the editor-in-chief of Crisis Magazine. He is also the author of 8 books, including his most recent, The Jesse Tree, which you might remember. We had an interview. We had him on the podcast discussing the Jesse Tree, an Advent devotion. Well, that was co-written with his wife, Suzanne. Right. Okay, I pronounced it right. I was just checking. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Welcome back, Eric. It's great to see you.
Hey, it's great to be on. And yes, you did pronounce my wife's name correctly. Most people get it wrong, so you get points for that.
Okay,
awesome.
Good.
Awesome. Well, we have a saint that we want to talk about today. He's an interesting guy, I think, because he's a modern day saint. Modern, I think you would call him modern. And his name is Saint Josemaria Escriva. Did I pronounce it right, or is it Escriva?
I pronounce it like you did, Saint Josemaria Escriva.
So it must be right. If you pronounce it like I do, it must be right. I pronounce
a lot of things wrong.
but if we agree, we're good.
That's right.
Exactly. It is Escriva.
Oh, okay. So my wife is Española, Spanish speaking.
Saint Josemaria Escriva.
So there's
accent. There is an accent.
I struggle with English. I struggle pronouncing English. So don't go into other languages. I'm really in trouble.
So you should be editor of Crisis Magazine.
That's right.
But you wrote a book called Holiness is for Everyone. And the subtitle is a practical spirituality of Saint Josemaria Escriva. How did you run across Saint Josemaria?
Well, this book came out of my own personal experience. A number of years ago, I was living in the Washington, D.C. area. I was working as a computer programmer. I had my own software development company. And I was struggling with the whole balance of life and work, family, and trying to be holy. And this is the spiritual life. And in my mind, I felt like my work life was opposed to my spiritual life, meaning my work was keeping me from growing in holiness. And I had this group of guys I was friends with, still I'm friends with them. I moved out of the area, so I don't see them as much, but dads, big Catholic families like I had, and they all had secular jobs, for lack of a better term. Washington, D.C. area, we all work somehow connected to the government in general, as contractors or subcontractors or directly. And all of us, when we get together, we usually get together to play poker, but we talk about these things. And all of us had this exact same feeling that our work was keeping us from being better Catholics, from becoming more holy. And about the same time, I saw Scott Hahn was talking, who was my former professor, friend of mine, and he was talking about Opus Dei and Saint Josemaria Escriva. And it kind of was like, hey, this guy sounds like he might have something that could help me. He might have a message that might help me. And sure enough, that's exactly what it was. I started reading his works, but also his life. And I realized this was literally his mission, was to help lay people, particularly with the whole work spiritual life balance of seeing work not as an obstacle to holiness, but actually it's the means that God gives us to holiness, along with family life, of course, as well. But it's the means that God gives us to become holy. So that was my introduction to him. And I realized, wow, this guy I really like. So I introduced him to my friends as well. We all liked him. And so eventually then I was like, I want to write a book about this, because I feel like even though Opus Dei is well known, Saint Josemaria's actual message is less known to the world.
Interesting. Now, for full disclosure, you're like a 39th degree Opus Dei member, right?
I have sacrificed many kittens, and no, I am not a member at all of, and Opus Dei does not do that. At least as far as I know, I'm not a member. What do I know?
Wait, do you know an albino monk?
An albino assassin monk. I like to joke like there are no monks in Opus Dei. There are no assassins in Opus Dei, but there might be an albino or two. I don't know about that.
Right.
So 90,000 members, I'm sure there might be one or two. But I am not a member of Opus Dei. I'm not on any level a member. I did, when I lived in DC, there was an Opus Dei group there, and I would go to the monthly nights of evenings of reflection. I went to an Opus Dei retreat once, but I never, it's kind of funny. Their stereotype is they're very aggressive recruiters, stuff like that. They never asked me to join.
No, they're not aggressive at all.
Right. I mean, I thought maybe they didn't
contrary
ask
to the
me just
charism,
because
I
it was
think.
me, but no, they didn't even ask me to join. If I wanted to, and I asked, they probably would have been like, okay, let's talk about it. But yeah, so it was very much, I'm not a member. And that's kind of was my point of writing the book, is I felt like all the books I read by him or for him, about him, were really in the Opus Dei world. Like you had to almost be a member of Opus Dei to know about them. They're published by the Opus Dei publisher, and that's who it was promoted to. And so the average Catholic didn't really know much about this, but his spirituality was not for just members of Opus Dei. That's a distinct call that somebody might have. It really was for literally everybody. I mean, he wanted his spirituality to help anybody and everybody. So that's why really the reason for the book was like, I want to introduce him to non-Opus Dei members like me.
Yeah, great. So I also find him incredibly practical, and I've read The Way and some of his works and found them to be amazing. So can you tell us a little bit about the layout of the book? One of the things that I noted was you, at the end of each book, at the end of each chapter, you have a read, meditate, pray, and contemplate. So it's almost like this could be like a month-long retreat in and of itself, or maybe less, maybe not a whole. I mean, there's 9 chapters, but I just really love the way it was laid out. I think it's super practical. It has meditations, reflections in it. Tell us a little bit about why you designed it the way you did.
Yeah. So what I wanted to do was, first, I just want to make sure people establish, you are called to be a saint. So I start with that. Just, yes, this is for you. I literally mean everybody when I say holiness for everyone. But I also wanted to introduce St. Josemaria. It's not a biography of St. Josemaria. I have one chapter that basically gives, in a nutshell, his life story, which is interesting and fascinating. I would encourage people to read full biographies of his life. But then I wanted to give the foundations of his spirituality, because typically every saint, when they have a spirituality, I mean, certain saints have spirituality. St. Francis, St. Dominic, St. Ignatius Loyola, St. Teresa of Avila, people like that. They have spiritualities, and St. Josemaria did too. But they're based on certain foundations. And so for St. Josemaria, for example, one of his foundations is this idea of that we are divine filiation, which means we are children of God, sons and daughters of God, and that we look at God as our loving Father. And that we really take that seriously. Like we all pray the Our Father. We all talk about God the Father. But he really wants us to radically understand that we should look at him as a loving Father. And so when we get late, and the reason I do this is because later when we're talking about the practical spirituality, some of it's hard. Some of it's very kind of regimented and difficult, and you go through it. And it's like you can get to you can go into it like, okay, here's my duty. I have to do this, almost like I'm a member of the military. I have to do this. Or you can go into it like, I'm a son of God and I want to please my Father. My Father's like, hey, I would like you to do these things because this will make you more like me. And I do that out of love. So I have the foundations in the first part of the book, the first few chapters. And in the second part, it's a breakdown of the practical aspects of actually doing his spirituality, because that's the key, is the practical spirituality of it. And so, and in every chapter, I really want people they can if they want to, but it's not a book I intended for people to breeze through, just kind of read it through like you'd read a biography, for example. It's more a matter of, okay, understand this message of this chapter, meditate upon it, think about it, then go to the next chapter, but get that foundation. So it does build upon, each chapter kind of builds upon the one before it. So another thing, I don't think people should pick, okay, I'm going to do chapter 7 and just read that one. because you might get some of the outward benefit, but you're not really seeing underneath the what St. Josemaria, his life was about, and what his theological foundations were for why he's saying do this or do that.
Very good. Well, before we jump into, how to do it, and the book we're talking about today is Holiness for Everyone. It's about the spirituality, the practical spirituality of St. Josemaria Escriva. Before we jump into that, what's unique about him as a modern saint? We have about a minute before the break, but maybe we can cover that and if we need to after the break as well.
Yeah, so he was born in 1902, so he was a 20th century saint. He died in 1975. So my life coincided with his somewhat. I won't say how much, but it did somewhat. And so he's modern in that sense. Obviously, he's a 20th century saint, but also he had a very modern mentality in that he understood the direction the world was going. And so he understood how busy people were getting with a lot of noise. And so he wanted to give us practical means. How do we still grow in holiness in this busy world? I often say, if you've ever read The Way, I mean, he's perfect for Twitter.
Yeah,
I mean, he would
all
have
the brief statements. Yeah,
right. He just makes these beautiful, profound statements in less than 240 characters often, or whatever it is. And so he's almost like made for us in today's world, our very inundated world. He gets through all that crap, so to speak, and says, okay, how can we stay focused in the midst of all this craziness that we have in the modern world?
Perfect. So when we get back from the break, we continue our conversation with Eric Sammons. The foreword of the book is by Scott Hahn, and the title is Holiness for Everyone, the Practical Spirituality of St. Josemaria Escriva, published by Sophia Institute Press. We'll be right back. Ready to go back?
Mm-hmm.
And are you going to hit?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, on your mark. Well, before we go back, just so I don't get in trouble, we have a course coming up for those listening and wanting to be holy and learn about discernment of visions and revelations in the interior life. The course will be on private revelations from major apparitions like Lourdes, Fatima, Guadalupe, Divine Mercy, Sacred Heart, to lesser private revelations and mystical phenomena. And I think we're using Father Gabriel of St. Mary Magdalene's text on this that we helped to bring back into print through Sophia Institute Press. It'll be taught by Father Matthew McDonald. It's a School of Spiritual Formation course, which means it'll be deep but not extreme, and you can do it if you're a busy mom or a busy employee or whatever you are, or a boss or whatever. Wednesday, May 17th. This course and many others you can find out at avila-institute.org, A as in Apple, V as in Victor, ILA-institute.org. On your mark, it said go. This is Dan and Stephanie Burke. Welcome back to Divine Intimacy Radio. We're talking with Eric Sammons about holiness for everyone. And, Steph, you really need this, so you might want to ask him a lot of questions.
Yeah, I do need this. I need to be holy.
Yeah.
What I loved before the break, Eric, you were talking about that Saint Josemaria Escriva. Sorry, Josemaria Escriva. I'm Hispanic and I can't say it.
Right.
How he really understood where society was going, the busyness of life. He could kind of see the writing in the wall. So he wanted to help families, individuals become holy within that context. And I'm seeing that all around. It's just gotten to almost a fever pitch, the busyness of life, and families are, kind of just breathing air through a straw underwater, and they're trying to stay above it, and they have a desire to be holy, and they just don't understand, how do I make this happen in the course of my normal everyday life and challenges and difficulties. And so I love that that's where his spirituality is. So how does he help lay people in particular grow in holiness? What was his focus there?
So he had a few different foci, I guess you'd say. One is the idea of being a contemplative in the midst of the world. So St. Josemaria had a great respect for contemplative nuns. We think of contemplative or rather somebody in contemplative life, a monk, a nun, something like that, where they live outside of the world, so to speak. They do not have interaction with the greater world. And that's a beautiful thing. I've always believed they basically are the foundation of the church, keep us from completely falling apart. And so he had great respect for that. But he also recognized everybody really is supposed to be a contemplative. It's a scary thought. People don't think of themselves, most people don't think of themselves as contemplatives. That's somebody who prays all day. But his idea was, no, you are called in one sense to pray always, to pray all day. And so he really wanted us to consider the idea that we're contemplatives as well, even in our busy lives. So obviously some of that would be that you set aside time for prayer. And that's the foundation. If you're not doing that, you can't do the rest of it anyway. So you are spending an hour a day in a space that is dedicated for your prayer life, that you're focused, you're not interrupted by anything, no devices, all that stuff. So he wouldn't have known about devices yet, but he would definitely have said no devices. And so that's one thing. But beyond that, your whole day needs to be touching times of prayer. So for example, let's say you just work a 9-to-5 job at the office. So you would do little things, like, for example, you might have a crucifix sitting on your desk. You would have certain times, like, for example, say the Angelus. It's noon. You say the Angelus. You might have to say it interiorly because you're in an office situation where you can't say it exteriorly, for example. You might say other ejaculations throughout the day. You're doing these different things so your day, you never go this extended period of time without directly saying, okay, I'm offering this up to you, God. I'm doing this for you. So this idea of contemplative midst of the world is very important. But then he also, though, and this is particularly the key point, is the work. Everybody has work they do. And so just to be clear, I'm not talking about paid work. So the stay-at-home mom, for example, her work is maintaining the home, taking care of her kids, all the things that make up that life. So when I say work, just want to make sure people are clear. It's not necessarily paid work, but we all have work that we do. A student, for example, has work. And so he really wants us to recognize that work needs to be offered to God. And the image I love the best is he talks about the priest has their altar where they offer up the sacrifice of the Mass. We all have altars. So for example, the computer programmer, his altar is his desk at work. That's his altar where he's offering up his work to God. The stay-at-home mom, the diaper changing table might be her altar.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And you're offering up. And so for him, the idea of excellence in work, and some people kind of thought he was a little bit obsessive about this. Like, you really want to do excellent work in everything whatever your work is, you do your best, because you're not doing it for your boss. You're doing it for God. So what this does, and this was what I was talking about earlier with some of my friends, some of our work that we did felt meaningless. It felt, I mean, like I said, I was a subcontractor for a contractor of the federal government. That's not exactly something that you're just like, wow, I'm really changing the world here for Christ. Because I did software development, and it was for like this, the highway administration, something like that. Yet what St. Josemaria was saying is that is the way you grow in holiness. You offer that up and you do that work for God directly, not for some government bureaucrat maybe who might be using it. And that really then transforms your daily life, because now it's like when I'm sitting there doing my computer program, whatever the case, whatever it is you're doing, it's a means of holiness. And so I would say that's kind of the two major things. The most I think of is the contemplative midst of the world, and then your work being your path to holiness.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. In fact, it's an interesting timing on this interview with you. We just had a conversation with a beautiful couple recently, and he had some concern about the intensity of his work and wanting to be holy in it, and wanting to ensure that his work didn't become an idol. And what I'm hearing from Saint Josemaria Escriva in his approach to this is that your work becomes a shifting from an idol to an offering.
Right.
So you go to work and you're at the altar of your work, and that altar transforms your work that could become an idol into an offering. And then the Lord blesses that and multiplies it, and it becomes a means of your sanctification rather than your damnation and your downfall.
Right, because it goes against kind of both extremes that we can have with work. One is laziness, sloth, that we just, if we have a somewhat meaningless job, we don't take it seriously. That's not a good thing, because that's not offering up your best to God. But also on the other side, the workaholic, which a lot of Americans particularly fall into, that's also an extreme it protects against, because if you're offering up to God, God is not asking you to put work ahead of your family.
Right.
And so if you're offering your excellent work to God, well, then you're not going to be working until 10 o'clock at night if you don't have to, just because you're trying to get ahead and make more money or something like that, because you're not doing it for the money, you're doing it for God. So it really does help mitigate against both those extremes that we can have in our work life, which I really like. But it is funny, because one of the criticisms against Opus Dei is they often it's like the rich, the successful, stuff like that. Well, part of that is because they're so focused on telling people, do your best work. And if you do your best work, it's not like it's prosperity gospel, where all of a sudden you work, you follow God and you'll get rich. But often if you do excellent work, you will get promoted, you will get raises and things like that. But the beauty is that's not why you're doing it. You're just doing it because you want to do excellent work for God. And if these other benefits happen, great. And if they don't happen, that's okay too.
It reminds me of the passage in St. Paul in the New Testament, do everything as if, for the Lord, which is really, probably one of the passages that was a big thing for him. One thing you mentioned on the fly that I think is foundational to all of this, and I suspect to your life, is that if we have a time of prayer with the Lord that always occurs, always is kind of the compass for the day, that really lays the groundwork for being able to pay attention to him during the day. And I frankly have never met anyone who without a prayer time, that's specific, then had the ability to pray, at all times, or even pray frequently, during work. How important is daily mental prayer in his spirituality?
It's foundational, like you said. He has what he calls the plan of life that he encourages everybody to have. And so, for example, and the plan of life begins the moment you wake up. He calls it the heroic minute. And I love this idea.
Yeah.
So your alarm goes off. Most of us do not want to get up. Our body is resisting. It wants to go back to sleep. And this is a first mortification that we can offer up to God in the day. And it's a beautiful mortification because it's not unhealthy in any way. It doesn't harm the body. It's actually good for you. And so that's your first moment. That's your heroic moment where you get up. The alarm goes off, you hit it, you get up immediately. You don't like stay in bed or anything like that. And then you make your morning offering. So right there at the beginning of your day, the first thing you do after you sit up, maybe to wake up, you then make your morning offering. And there can be different morning offerings that you can use. But then you do then have also that hour of prayer a day. And I do emphasize the word hour. And I know some people might not be there yet. That's fine. You work up to it. But really, I think St. Josemaria just joins the mass of spiritual directors and saints who would argue that a typical person should have an hour a day. That you're focused on that time of mental prayer where you're really conversing with God. And he would agree with the other spiritual masters who would just talk about, you might start with spiritual reading, various things. He might be a little different for each person depending on what spirituality connects with you the best. But you have to have that. And then everything else goes at. And I think St. Josemaria made it very clear that if you don't have that hour, that time of mental prayer every day, then your foundation just doesn't exist. And you like you say, you're not going to remember, you're not going to be thinking about God throughout the day if you weren't conversing with him first thing in the morning. So that was all part of a plan of life. And then also he would recommend on a regular basis, you have evenings of reflection. That's why Opus Dei holds monthly evenings of reflection, and also annual retreats. So you have these times where you're every day, yes, you have this hour, but even that's not enough. You also want to have maybe once a month, you do a little bit more. And once a year, you hopefully have a weekend or week-long retreat, because we just need that. Our fallen nature and the way the world is, it's beating down on us. And it's just like an athlete needs his daily exercise, but then he has more intense times as well. The same thing is true of the spiritual athlete.
Perfect. I love that in the heroic moment. I like to say saints don't have snooze buttons. They just don't exist for the saint, because you don't worship your bed, you worship God. And if you worship your bed, that God's not going to save you. But there is one who can and will if we orient our compass to him every day. You really should get this book, Holiness for Everyone, The Practical Spirituality of St. Josemaria Escriva by Eric Sammons, published by the great and marvelous publishing house, Sophia Institute Press, who's doing such an amazing job. Eric, thanks so much for being with us, and thanks for working so hard at Crisis Magazine and all you do to help advance the kingdom of God through the truth of the church.
Thanks so much for having me. I love talking about St. Josemaria, and I just encourage everybody to pray every day. I mean, obviously buy the book if it's going to help you, but more importantly, just pray every day.
Amen.
Awesome. Until next time, may the God of peace make you perfect in holiness. May he preserve you whole and entire, spirit, soul, and body, irreproachable at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thanks, Brother Eric.